Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. Highway 50, right between Sacramento and Placerville, doing paperwork in the patrol car while my partner, Officer Jalen Torres, was scanning the speed gun over westbound traffic. Quiet night, fog rolling in low from the hills. No traffic, no drunks, just crickets and the occasional hum of a semi grinding its way through the mountain grade. Then the radio crackled with something different. Unit 232, respond to a commercial vehicle accident, possible hazmat carrier, eastbound 50, mile marker 67, 2 miles past the Salmon Falls overpass. Dispatch said Caltrans had flagged it as a major incident. No brake marks, no driver contact, just a flipped trailer with no emergency beacon. CHP Hazmat was en route from Rancho Cordova, but they were delayed. We were only 7 minutes out. We hit the road. I've been with the California Highway Patrol for 6 years. Torres, 3, good guy. Former Army military police. Sharp instincts, steady trigger finger. We joked a lot, mostly to pass the time. But that ride was different. He didn't say a word after we pulled onto the shoulder to let an ambulance pass. Neither did I. Something about the tone of that dispatch. Just a little too flat, a little too careful. By the time we reached mile marker 67, the fog was thick enough to blanket the road signs. I caught the flash of reflective wreckage in the median divider. We slowed. It wasn't just one truck. It was 2. Tractor trailers. Both white, no logos, no license markings, just long container rigs. The first was jackknifed and half embedded in the tree line. The second lay flipped on its side across both lanes. Rear doors split open. Cargo spilled across the asphalt. Except there was no cargo. Just shattered crates, thin foam padding, and a strange smell. Chemical, bitter, almost citrus, but wrong. Like something that didn't belong outdoors. Torres cut the engine. We stepped out. I approached the flipped rig, while Torres circled the cab of the one that had veered into the woods. My boots crunched over glass, and the fog swallowed up the beam of my flashlight after 20 feet. I drew closer and spotted black footprints, barefoot, smudged like someone had stepped in soot. They led away from the truck and disappeared into the trees. There was blood on the driver's side window, smear marks. But no driver. I keyed up my shoulder mic. 232, to dispatch. 2 semis, unknown cargo, both wrecked and abandoned. No visual on occupants. Request ETA on hazmat, medics and fire rescue. Dispatch replied, copy Unit 232, all response units rerouted. Advise extreme caution. Subject vehicles flagged federal. Stand by for contact. That word hit different. Flagged federal. I turned to check on Torres. He was maybe 50 yards out, standing at the edge of the tree line, partially crouched. He motioned for silence and pointed forward. I followed his gaze and saw movement in the woods. 2 figures, naked, pale, staggering between the trees like they were drunk or blind. Their skin looked burned or raw, I couldn't tell. But they moved with purpose. Not random, not aimless. They were following something. Torres unholstered his sidearm. I did the same. Do we call it in? I whispered. We follow. He muttered back. If that's our missing driver, we need to make contact. You want to split? Better coverage. I didn't argue. We'd done this drill before. Split entry, 2-man tail. We'd cover more ground. I pushed through the underbrush, tracking the shapes ahead. They slipped over a low ridge, vanishing into the trees. I followed, climbing the slope until I came to a clearing. Scattered stumps, a half-buried logging claw, and a steep drop into a muddy drainage ditch. I crouched behind a rusted forklift, its frame sunk into the dirt, and scanned the tree line. Maybe 20 minutes passed before I heard it. A few distant shots, then a scream, brief, piercing, cut short. It didn't sound human, didn't sound like any animal I recognized either. It was somewhere in between, like a person choking while trying to yell. Then came the silence again. I tightened my grip on the Glock and moved toward the sound. There were boot prints in the mud. Torres's, no question. Size 12 Bates, same tread, but they ended near a stand of pines, and next to those boots, I saw drag marks. Something had been pulled through the dirt, hard enough to leave a trough. Broken twigs, blood spray, something thrashed here. I followed the trail slowly. Everything felt muffled, like the air had gone thick. 10 yards ahead, I found his flashlight. Still on, still warm, and next to it, his vest. Not dropped, torn open, the shoulder straps shredded. I radioed. "Torres, do you copy? Say again, do you copy?" No answer. I scanned in every direction, turning full circle, but I was alone. Then I heard movement to my right, brushing, then a low shuffle. I raised the light. Nothing. Then again, left now, twigs snapping. When I turned, I caught a glimpse. It was Torres, or it had been Torres. He stepped into the clearing, slowly, barefoot, uniform in tatters, skin pale, blotched. His mouth hung open, not from pain, but like it had simply stopped working. His eyes were clouded, unfocused, but locked onto me. I didn't speak. I just watched as he took one slow step forward, then another, then lunged. I called out to him, tried to get his attention, to figure out what the hell was happening, but he didn't answer. No hesitation, no recognition, just this guttural, furious noise, like a growl torn from somewhere deep in his throat. Then he came at me, full sprint, like he didn't even see me as a person anymore. I drew and fired once, center mass. He stumbled, paused, then straightened again, still coming. I fired 2 more, no hesitation, one shoulder, one gut. He didn't even flinch. At 15 feet, I went for the headshot. He dropped. The echo cracked through the woods like thunder. My ears rang. My hands shook, though I didn't notice until much later. I walked up slowly, cautiously. His eyes were still open. No breath, no twitch, nothing. But it wasn't Torres anymore, not the man I knew. I backed away and keyed up the mic again. 232. Officer down. Repeat. Officer down. Confirmed hostile threat. Request immediate backup to my location. Silence. Then static. Then a strange tone, like a burst transmission. Then a different voice, not dispatch. Unit 232. This is control. Do not engage. Secure perimeter and await containment. Extraction en route. Do not approach any subjects. Do not attempt medical aid. Maintain radio silence. That wasn't CHP. That wasn't any frequency I recognized. The voice was sterile and calm in a way I didn't like. Not emergency response calm, more like detached. And when I tried to answer, the frequency cut to static, then fell silent. Just gone. No hissing, no carrier wave. Dead air. I clicked over to the Sacramento command band. Nothing. Switched to Placer County Fire. Same thing. Even the scratchy Cal OES standby band we used during wildfires was just empty. Not jammed. Cleared. Whoever had hijacked that frequency didn't want a response. They didn't want to talk. They wanted to be heard once, and then disappear. I shut my radio off and stepped away from where Torres had fallen. His body was still there at the edge of the pines, collapsed in a sprawl of pine needles and dirt. I wasn't even sure if what I'd shot was him anymore. The face looked like Torres, sure, but wrong. Stiff in a way that wasn't death, yet somehow worse. He'd been strong, sharp, the kind of partner you trust on a search call in the Sierra foothills when it's midnight and you're 10 miles from a cell tower. But I'd looked into his eyes when he came stumbling toward me in that clearing, and those weren't human eyes. I stood there too long. My breathing had slowed, but my hands still felt wrong. Not shaking, just off, like they didn't belong to me anymore. I forced myself to walk, back the way I came. I knew I shouldn't linger, but my brain wouldn't let go. The fact that he never screamed, never even grunted, stuck with me like a splinter in the skull. He just came at me, silent, relentless, determined, and there had been something else in that woods. I hadn't seen it, but I'd felt it. Behind me, beside me, maybe even above me, watching, waiting. When I reached the edge of the forest, the air smelled different, cleaner, like rain on hot metal, but there was no storm, and there were no trucks. I stood where the first overturned semi-trailer had been just 2 hours ago, still remembering the blood smeared on the door, the crates strewn across the road, the smell of the chemical release. Now there was nothing here, only tire tracks and a few shards of broken glass remained, and a small spot of blood. Otherwise, the road looked normal, as if nothing had happened at all. I walked to where our cruiser had been parked behind the scene. Still there, driver's door shut, engine off, all lights dark. But when I opened the door, I saw the dash unit blinking red, the kind of blink it gives when the vehicle's remote access has been tampered with. Not a mechanical fault, a lockout. I opened the laptop terminal and the whole screen was black except a single message: user credentials invalid, access revoked. I tried again, same result. I opened the trunk. First aid kit was gone. So was the backup rifle. My patrol shotgun had been taken from the rack. The security mount hadn't been forced, it had been disengaged with the override key. That's when I knew for sure someone had been inside this car. I reached for my body cam on instinct. Gone, ripped clean from the plate under my vest. My name tag too. No sign of struggle, no damage. Just removed. Clean, precise, quiet. Whoever they were, they didn't want evidence. Not of what we saw. Not of what happened to Torres. Not of me being here at all. I climbed into the cruiser, locked the doors, and turned the engine. No GPS, no radio, no dash link. It wasn't a cruiser anymore, just a ghost car. I reversed and pulled back onto the highway heading east. Placerville was about 28 miles out, but I didn't make it that far. Around the next bend, maybe 15 miles up, I saw something strange. The fog had started to thin just enough to see flashing lights, a faint orange glow ahead. My first thought was a work crew, then I saw them. 3 black SUVs, no CHP markings, no Caltrans, no plates, all angled across the lanes like a wedge, hazard lights blinking in sync. The kind of setup used for hard stops in high-risk chases, except there were no units trailing, no spike strips, just that quiet formation, idling in the road like they'd been waiting. I slowed and coasted forward. As I neared, I saw 4 men step out. No uniforms, no name tags, no weapons I could see, but heavy tactical vests, full comms gear, and matte black helmets with smoked visors. I couldn't see their eyes, couldn't tell who they were. They didn't move like cops. Too tight, too synchronized. One of them raised a hand and signaled for me to stop. I rolled the window down a few inches. CHP, Officer Nathan Cale, I said. I'm responding to... He interrupted. Step out of the vehicle. Slowly. His voice wasn't a shout. It was calm, flat, like a surgeon before a cut. I noticed his hand hovering by his hip. No badge, no ID, no reason to trust him. What's your unit? I asked. You guys military? Exit the vehicle. I didn't move. I'd seen checkpoints before. During fire evacuations, landslides, even the Oroville Dam overflow back in 2017. None of them looked like this. Behind the man, one of the SUVs shifted. I heard a click, then saw something lift from behind the passenger seat. A tube, shouldered. I knew that silhouette. Rifle. Suppressed. Not CHP issue. Not even SWAT. I started to reverse. The man in front shouted something. Couldn't hear it through the closed window, but he lunged forward. I slammed the gear into reverse and punched the gas. A shot cracked, muffled but sharp. The back glass shattered. Another round tore through the rear quarter panel. I swerved sideways, fishtailed, and corrected hard. Tires screaming, I shot backward down the shoulder, just inches from the embankment. As I cleared the line of sight, I spotted a dirt road on the left. A narrow fire access trail I knew from seasonal patrol maps. It led toward an old closed CHP substation we'd used during snow emergencies, before it was decommissioned 3 years ago. It was barely marked on the map now, just a faded rectangle. I jerked the wheel and took the turn too fast. Gravel and dust kicked up behind me as I bounced onto the unpaved trail. Branches scraped the side of the cruiser. I flicked off my headlights and kept the high beams dead. Total blackout. Nothing but tree line and memory. No one followed, at least not immediately. I drove a quarter-mile in complete darkness until the road forked into a clearing. The old substation was still there. Small brown structure with a weather-worn CHP logo on the side, mostly obscured by ivy and overgrowth. The main window was boarded up. The antenna mast had snapped at the base during last year's windstorm. No working radio, but it had 4 walls and a locking door. I rolled the cruiser behind a shed near the back and killed the engine. I climbed out, gear belt still on, flashlight ready. The door was rusted but gave way after a shove. Inside was dust, filing cabinets, and the skeletal remains of a dispatch console. Nothing powered, no cameras, just maps and paper logs. Exactly what I needed. I dragged an old metal cabinet in front of the door and knelt behind the desk. Then I took out my phone, plugged it into a backup power pack, and waited. After 5 minutes, it flickered on. Still no signal, but the satellite compass worked. I used it to mark my location, 3 clicks east of Khyber's, off the main highway. Then I opened the local download folder. Every photo I'd taken that night, gone. Not deleted, wiped. They must have used a proximity scrambler, the kind you only see in military operations or federal black sites. It explains the blank dash terminal, the radio silence, even my body cam vanishing. This wasn't just containment. This was a full blackout, and it wasn't the kind you issue over the air. This had been physical, equipment swapped or disabled, IDs pulled, hardware stripped, vehicles erased, like a scene was being reset, wiped down, rewritten. They didn't want evidence. They didn't want witnesses. They wanted to control who even remembered what happened on that highway. And I'd slipped through the net. Barely. I stayed in the dark for the next hour. The station had no windows on the south wall, and I used that to my advantage. Sat low in the former dispatch cubicle, flipping through old topographical maps they'd left behind in a cracked binder. Nothing electronic. Just paper, local terrain, back roads, and Caltrans overlays from the previous decade. There was a fire access trail that looped north toward the Mormon Emigrant Trail. Mostly gravel now, overgrown, but still passable if you had clearance and patience. If I could follow it long enough, I might hit a ranger outpost or even make it to Jenkinson Lake. If I kept going west, there were older radio towers on Sly Park Ridge. Some of them had manual crank generators left from the old repeater network days. Towers built for resilience before digital came in. It was a plan. But I was running out of time. My uniform was damp with sweat. The station's inside temperature had started to rise. Even with the windows covered, I cracked a bottled water from an old emergency stash and stayed seated. Then I heard it. Gravel crunching outside. Not the heavy churn of tires, but a slow roll. Silent vehicle approach. Probably electric. Smart. No lights. No engine hum. Then a door shut softly. Boots on dirt. At least 2 pairs. Maybe 3. I moved slowly, slid my Glock out from the retention holster, and knelt low behind the main counter. There were 3 entry points to the old substation. The main door, the side garage entrance, and a narrow rear access used for maintenance. I'd only barricaded the front. That was a mistake. A quiet click echoed from the side wall. The garage. Someone was working the lock. There was a metallic clunk, then the squeal of hinges. The garage hadn't been opened in years, and its weight gave away the movement. A flashlight beam swept through, slow, methodical. No words, no call-outs, not police. I held still, waited. Then I heard the voice, muffled, filtered through some kind of throat mic. Clear north corner, moving center. Another voice followed. He's inside, thermal's clean, he's not moving. They had thermal. I shifted slightly, placing my shoulder against the back of the cabinet, breath held. If they had thermal, hiding wasn't going to save me. But maybe movement, timed movement, could throw them. I heard one of them step onto the linoleum just past the metal shelving unit. Slow, deliberate, one toe-to-heel movement at a time. Even through the soft-soled tactical boots, I caught the faint creak of pressure against old vinyl tile and the minute scrape of a rifle sling brushing canvas. Whoever was on point had practiced movement in tight quarters. This wasn't a rush. It was a surgical entry. Then another set of footsteps entered behind him, slower, more spaced, covering the angles. These weren't rookies. No wasted movement. No unnecessary chatter. I didn't hear radio clicks. No live comms. Which meant they were probably running throat mics and short-range encrypted loop. Internal chatter only. That's why I hadn't heard their approach until they were already inside. Their boots didn't squeak. Their rifles didn't rattle. Not a single strap loose. This was professional, quiet gear. Some of it custom. It wasn't standard SWAT issue. And I knew from experience it wasn't ours. My heartbeat didn't pound in my ears. It ticked, like a timer. Steady, controlled, relentless. There was no adrenaline haze, no tunnel vision, just breath, just angles, just weight. Far side, by the dispatch wall, one of them whispered. The voice was low, focused, professional. He wasn't asking. He was confirming. That meant they'd already seen my heat signature through the wall. Thermal scan, short range, maybe shoulder mounted or mounted to a drone. Either way, they knew where I was. They didn't know if I was armed or injured, but they knew I was cornered. I shifted slightly and pressed myself tighter into the bend between the desk and the floor-mounted cabinet. I kept the Glock at low ready, not aimed. No reason to waste that tension yet. The broken edge of the metal filing cabinet beside me jutted outward like a blade, and I measured the weight of it in my head. It wasn't much. Sheet steel and an inch-thick rubber foot. But in tight quarters, surprise and momentum can shift the odds faster than any caliber. The first set of boots rounded the corner, half visible beneath the overhead shadows. Then, the second pair. They moved in a staggered line, point and offset. The lead man's rifle tracked slowly as he cleared each quadrant. No flashlight, no laser, just natural light from the distant window, flickering under the pressure of the dying fluorescent ceiling tube still buzzing with weak power. Their armor wasn't military, at least not standard issue. Sleek, contoured panels without reflective surfaces. No insignia, no patches. Their helmets were shaped like standard high-cut operators, but with integrated visors, probably ballistic rated, IR compatible, and those visors were down. The man in front leaned in slightly, weapon angled toward the narrow corner where I had been a minute earlier. He didn't sweep side to side. He committed. All his focus was forward. He held out two fingers, rotated them. A signal. The trailing man adjusted his position. That was my chance. I didn't hesitate. I rose with my full weight and drove the edge of the steel cabinet outward and up into the lead man's ribs like a ram. The cabinet didn't have sharp edges, but at that angle, with that force, it slammed into his side like a body check from a linebacker. His rifle clipped the counter. He lost his footing, staggered sideways, and his boot caught on the cable bundle at his feet. He stumbled backward with a loud crack as his spine struck the metal housing of the electrical panel. At that same instant, the trailing man brought his rifle up. Too slow. I pivoted, Glock already aimed, and fired twice. Center mass. The first round punched into his chest plate with a dull thump. The vest absorbed most of it, but it knocked him off balance. The second round hit higher, near the base of the collarbone. I couldn't confirm if it penetrated, but he dropped back hard against the wall, rifle sliding out of his grip. The first man was trying to recover, hand reaching for a sidearm. I lunged, full body tackle. My shoulder slammed into him just as he regained balance. He hit the wall again, helmet cracking sideways. I drove my left knee up into his ribs once. He twisted. I hit again. Felt something give beneath the plate. Maybe the lower edge shifted, maybe something cracked. Either way, he groaned. The first sound either of them had made. His rifle clattered to the ground. I stomped on it, shoved him back, and leveled my Glock under his chin, where the helmet flared just enough to expose the neck seam. I fired once. The head jerked violently. The body dropped like someone cut the puppet strings. No twitch, just the sound of weight hitting concrete. I turned. The second man was still down, twitching, legs scissoring. His arms reached out like he was trying to crawl backward into the wall. One hand was still wrapped around a suppressed MPX. compact variant, maybe a 5-inch barrel, chambered in 9, civilian-styled weapon with mil-mod rails and thermal sensors fitted under the guard. Not factory, custom field gear. I stepped over. He tried to speak. His other hand went to his neck, tapping something. A throat mic, probably transmitting, probably begging for backup. Too late. I kicked the rifle from his grip and pulled his visor up with my free hand. He was young. Couldn't have been more than 24. Buzz cut, pale, eyes wide, shocked, not scared, just confused, like someone who was told the other guy wouldn't fight back. He gurgled once, his mouth filled with something too thick to be just spit. Then he stopped moving. The room fell still. The only sound was the ceiling tube humming, like a dying insect, and my breath, pushing out through clenched teeth. I stayed frozen for 5 seconds, then 10. No movement, no more boots, no warning calls, no one shouting fallback or breach or double clear, just quiet. But I wasn't done. I remembered the third man, the one outside. I moved fast, limping toward the door, weapon raised, adrenaline pulling my weight forward. The yard was empty, gravel, fog, the shadow of pine trees swaying, and silence. The vehicle that brought them, gone, no tracks in the gravel, no lights. Whoever was running this op had pulled the perimeter man the second I opened fire. Not to help, but to cut losses. Or maybe he was still nearby, watching, recording, waiting for a clean shot. I didn't give him one. I turned back inside, shut the door, and jammed the broken steel cabinet under the frame as a makeshift barricade. I returned to the bodies, searched fast. Their gear wasn't military surplus, nothing standard issue. Everything was modular, field adapted and clean. No wear, no personal effects. The kind of kit you build when you're funded well and told to disappear afterward. I stripped the better of the 2 suppressed rifles. Smaller frame, good weight, still warm from a fresh mag. Took 3 loaded magazines, a sidearm in a Kydex drop holster, and a pouch of thermal cutting tools I didn't recognize. Small, circular, high heat. Probably meant to slice through panels or locks in seconds. I pocketed one of their comm units, custom built, no labels, black housing. I didn't power it on. Not yet. No idea what band it used or if it was pinging. I scanned both bodies for trackers. Nothing on the usual spots. No wrist tags, no ankle chips, but both wore tight-fitting compression shirts beneath their armor with embedded mesh, a heat-dampening weave. That's how they were moving through infrared zones unnoticed. That wasn't commercial tech. This wasn't a cleanup crew. This was a kill team. I left the bodies where they were. Whatever agency or contractor group sent them hadn't expected resistance. They thought they were scrubbing a leftover witness. Someone scared, alone, outgunned. They didn't count on someone trained to hit back. Not at this range, not in this kind of terrain. I moved fast, grabbed a torn highway poncho from the emergency locker, and stepped outside into the dark. The fog had lifted slightly, and the stars were clearer now, the kind of sky you only see above 3,000 feet. But the air still smelled wrong. Not fire, not ozone, just wrong, like hospital floors soaked in chemicals that don't belong in your lungs. Every breath came with a dry taste, like I'd been breathing through a plastic mask for too long. I pulled the poncho hood up and kept the rifle tucked tight beneath it. Barrel down, trigger covered. The fire road ahead was narrow, carved decades ago through forest too stubborn to yield. Most of it was pine and red fir, with the occasional granite outcrop slicing up through the soil like ribs. I stayed in the ditch line where the brush was thickest and moved in bursts. Stop, listen, move. Classic patrol tactics. But now, I wasn't trying to sneak up on anyone. I was trying to avoid becoming part of something I didn't understand. About 2 miles up, the trail forked again. One path curved down toward Jenkinson Lake. The other kept climbing toward an old fire lookout I remembered from a seasonal evacuation drill. It had been shut down 5 years ago after the county lost funding for active fire spotters, but the structure was still there. Steel tower, cabin on top, glass windows in every direction. Most people wouldn't bother going that way. Not in the dark, not in the cold. But I wasn't most people, and I wasn't looking for easy. I needed elevation. I needed distance. I needed to see. I cut uphill. The climb was rough, steeper than I remembered. Between fallen branches and half-buried roots, it took me nearly an hour to cover the last half-mile. My boots slipped twice on loose shale, and at one point I had to use the edge of the rifle to brace myself as I scrambled up a mossy incline. But when I finally reached the clearing at the base of the tower, I paused. The door to the first platform was hanging open. Wind rustled through the slats, and the wood creaked overhead. I waited a full minute before climbing. Each step was slow, controlled, my breath shallow. The stars above barely lit the steel supports, and the whole structure felt like it was holding its breath. When I reached the cabin at the top, I stayed low and checked the door. Hinges rusted, frame swollen with age. I pushed it open an inch at a time, weapon raised, until I was inside. Empty. The air smelled like old dust and mold. There were 2 broken chairs, a filing cabinet, and a map table bolted to the floor. A yellowed U.S. Forest Service chart from 1998 was still spread across it, laminated and peeling at the corners. But the most important thing was in the corner, a solar battery box connected to a shortwave emergency rig, probably left behind when they shut down the post. I flipped the cover and checked the charge. Still alive, half capacity, enough to transmit. I powered on the set. No noise, just static. I switched through the bands, one by one. Nothing. Then, on 7.400 megahertz, I caught a burst of audio. Non-civilian traffic confirmed on Vector 6. Hold perimeter. Repeat, hold perimeter. Then silence again. But that was enough. That wasn't local fire. That wasn't law enforcement. That was encrypted radio bleed. The kind you only get when someone nearby is running tactical comms on a neighboring band, which meant they were close, closer than I thought. I didn't try to answer, just listened. For the next 10 minutes, I sat cross-legged on the floor of that cold little shack, trying to make sense of the maps, the gear I'd stripped from the 2 men back at the substation, and the vague memories from training classes I'd half forgotten. Biohazard response, disaster management, continuity of operations. None of them prepared me for this. But one thing kept circling in my mind. The semis. They weren't commercial. No plates, no tags, no shipping IDs. Just sterile white rigs full of sealed crates and whatever came out of them. The men who arrived after had scrubbed it all, pulled the vehicles, cleaned the site like it never existed. But that kind of operation doesn't just spin up overnight. That kind of silence doesn't happen unless people in power need it to happen. So I changed tactics. I turned the radio off, dug into the filing cabinet, and found a water-damaged binder labeled Forest Incident Reports from 2007 to 2013. Deep inside, there were field notes from a seasonal ranger named Warren D. Tully. One page stood out, a handwritten memo dated June 12, 2011. Found vehicle parked near Gate 14C again. No driver. Interior coated with strange residue. Notified dispatch. Told to ignore and resume route. 3rd time this month. Smell was the same as before, like spoiled plastic and copper. Recommend inspection of nearby creek bed if this continues. Gate 14C. That was south of the crash site, on a stretch of Bureau of Land Management land closed to the public since the 1990s. It bordered the old LaSalle Research Annex. My stomach turned. LaSalle had been a Department of Water Resources site on paper, but I remembered the real story. Back in 2009, there was a quiet lawsuit filed by a waste containment worker who claimed the annex wasn't handling water storage at all. It was importing biological material under special contract. Nobody paid attention. The case got sealed, but the name stuck with me. LaSalle was less than 5 miles from where those trucks flipped. This whole thing hadn't started at the crash site. The crash was just a leak, a rupture in something that had been boiling underground for years. Something someone had been preparing for, and hiding. Then noise outside came sharp, fast, gravel skittering. Not an animal, not wind, movement on the stairs. I flipped the table, dropped low behind it, and leveled the rifle at the door. Whoever it was, they'd climbed the tower silently. No flashlight, no talking. I counted the steps in my head, then the door creaked. No voice, no command, just a shadow shifting in. I fired once. The silhouette dropped. Another stepped in, rifle raised. I ducked. A burst of suppressed fire tore into the wall behind me. The glass exploded outward. I crawled to the side, came up behind the old desk, and fired again. 2 short taps. Center of mass. The second man went down wheezing. I heard more boots below. No time. I grabbed the solar battery with one arm, stuffed a map and the radio handset into my vest, and kicked open the back hatch. There was no ladder, just steel grating and a 25-foot drop to brush and rocks. I didn't think. I jumped. Pain exploded through my leg when I hit. My ankle folded. I rolled hard, vision flashing white, and crawled toward the trees. Behind me, voices shouted, sharp, angry. I heard someone drop onto the ground behind me. No warning. Just pursuit. I crawled behind a log, turned, and fired once. The shadow chasing me fell with a heavy grunt. Another shot cracked from the tower, slicing bark near my head. I kept crawling. Branches tore at my face. My hands were slick with dirt and blood, but I moved. 1 foot, then another. I couldn't feel my ankle anymore, either torn ligaments or broken outright. My knee dragged uselessly in the soil, catching on roots, pine needles, debris. The pain was behind me now, replaced by something colder and quieter. I'd slipped past the panic stage hours ago, past instinct, past calculation. This was the part you don't train for, where the only thing keeping you moving is the faint possibility that you might live long enough to matter. The first ridge gave way to a shallow drainage gully that twisted northwest, and I let gravity do the work, slid on my side through the mud, elbow grinding on packed stone. Once I hit the bottom, I pulled myself under a fallen log, tried to slow my breath. My throat was dry, lungs working in short bursts. I listened. No voices, no boots, but I wasn't alone. There was a sound, low and deliberate. Not footsteps, not gear. It reminded me of wet denim dragging across cement. Rhythmic, awkward, like something was figuring out how to move. Down the slope, not 40 yards ahead, a figure came into view. No gear, no weapon, just a man, or what used to be one. Thin, skin tight to the frame, shirt shredded, eyes grey and locked forward like he wasn't seeing anything in front of him. But then, without hesitation, he stopped, turned his head slightly, sniffed the air, then began walking straight toward me. Not stumbling, not swaying, just moving, too focused, too sure. Another one appeared behind him. Female, torn hiking jacket, hair matted, feet bare. Her posture was all wrong. One shoulder jutted too far forward, like the joint was broken, but she didn't seem to notice. Her pace matched his. I didn't move. A third shape rose near the tree line, crawling at first, then upright, each step in sync with the others. No communication, no sound, just direction. Me. I rolled slowly beneath the log and reached for the suppressed MPX I'd taken from the dead contractor. I raised it, sighted center on the lead figure, and paused. This close, you see everything. The way the skin peels at the edges, the dried blood crusted into the corners of the mouth, the subtle tremor in the fingers, like the body's trying to resist but failing. And the eyes, unblinking, grey, unhuman. I fired once. The man jerked back but didn't fall. I fired again, center mass, still moving. I took the third shot high, just below the orbital bone. He dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. The other two didn't pause, didn't react to the sound. They only changed speed, faster now, almost running. I fired again, twice. The woman collapsed halfway through a stride, skidding on the dirt. The third caught one round to the leg, fell, and began dragging itself forward, arm over arm, mouth opening like it was already chewing. I stood, limped backward, didn't finish it. No time. The trees to the west gave way to open ground. A rockfall had cleared a path years ago, and now it served as a natural fire break. At the far end, maybe half a mile out, I could just make out a fence, chain link, topped with rusted razor wire. Behind it, low cement buildings, half collapsed, windowless, sunken into the hill like bunkers. LaSalle Research Annex. Even from here, I could see that the place hadn't been used in years. The perimeter fence had holes wide enough to crawl through. The parking area was overgrown with weeds, but something had passed through recently. Mud trailed up the access ramp, scattered footprints half filled with rain. I crossed the open stretch as fast as I could, stopping twice to collapse and catch my breath. Every movement sent jolts of pain through my side. My shoulder burned from where the rifle sling had rubbed skin raw. I forced myself up the embankment, one knee at a time. Near the fence, I dropped to my stomach and rolled through a gap under the wire. It sliced the poncho, drew blood across my side. I didn't stop, just kept moving until I reached the foundation wall. The main door had been welded shut. I found a break in the side panel and used the pry tool I'd taken from the substation's dead contractor to crack it wide enough to squeeze through. Inside, it was silent. No lights, no power. The air tasted like dust and mold and something older, something synthetic. I turned on the flashlight, kept it low. The hallway was narrow, lined with peeling laminate and ancient fire signage. Water damage curled every edge. I moved through in silence, one step at a time, barrel forward. Then I found the first room. The label on the door read, "Primary Isolation Lab. Do not enter without clearance." The lock was rusted through. Inside, shattered glass coated the floor. A row of isolation tanks, empty now, stood against the wall. One of them still had streaks of something dark on the inner surface. Not blood, thicker, clotted. It had pooled near the base and hardened like resin. Someone had scratched letters into the inside of the tank wall, backward, from within. I leaned closer and read it in reverse through the glass. "They're not dead." That was all. A single line. Further down the corridor, I found a security room, ransacked, wires torn from the walls, but one of the paper logbooks was still in a drawer. Most of it was weather damaged. A few entries were readable. January 19th, arrival. Crates transferred from Zone 5C. No escort. Clearance delay. January 20th. Crate 04A breached during move. 1 staff exposure. Subject moved to quarantine. January 21st. Quarantine door damaged. Subject vanished. Sweep teams report no sign. All footage erased. January 22nd. External cleanup ordered. Primary research staff terminated. Remaining observers relocated. That was the final entry. There were no names, no initials, just cold summaries. The entire place had been a dump site for something too dangerous to keep in circulation, but not important enough to properly destroy. Whatever came out of that breached crate wasn't contained. And when it made it to the highway, everything that happened next was just part of the fallback plan. Scrub the records, eliminate witnesses, reset the zone. I limped back to the corridor, turned off the flashlight, and let the dark settle around me. My body felt distant, like I was watching it from somewhere else. My hands ached. My ankle was twice its normal size. My uniform was soaked through with sweat and blood and dirt. My badge was gone. My nameplate ripped off. My cruiser erased. In every official system, I no longer existed. But I had one thing left, the old handheld from the tower. I pulled it from my vest, unspooled the antenna and switched it on. I turned the dial back to 7.400 megahertz and held the mic close. I pressed the transmit button once, then said, "If anyone can hear this, my name is Officer Nathan Cale, California Highway Patrol, badge 2277. I was first on scene at mile marker 67, eastbound Highway 50. 2 trucks overturned, no manifest, no ID. Units claiming federal authority attempted to erase the site. My partner is gone, replaced by something. Not human. I am at LaSalle Research Annex. This is real. This is happening. Do not trust containment. Do not trust recovery. Whatever this is, it spreads. It learns. It doesn't stop." I released the key. The speaker hissed softly. No reply. I waited. 10 seconds. Then pressed the button again. "This is Officer Nathan Cale. If you're hearing this, Copy this message and send it out. I don't know how long I have, but I'm leaving this recorder here. Maybe someone finds it. Maybe someone listens. Maybe they stop what's coming. I set the radio down in the center of the room and backed away. Outside, the wind had shifted again. The chemical scent had grown stronger. And somewhere in the distance, behind the trees and the dark and the cold, I could hear them coming. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps my channel alive. Until next time, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and trust nothing, not even the silence.